History is written not only in blood and fire, but in the madness of kings. From the ashes of Dragonfire rose a dynasty that would one day tear itself apart. This is the story of House Targaryen's long decline, where glory gave way to tyranny, and where rebellion was born. Welcome, travelers of history and fire. Today, we journey deep into the chronicles of Westeros, through wars, betrayals, and the madness of rulers who once held the fate of kingdoms in their hands. If you love history as much as epic storytelling, you're in the right place. Before we dive in, tell me in the comments, if you lived in Westeros, which house would you swear allegiance to? And as always, if you enjoy exploring the rise and fall of empires, make sure to join us by subscribing, so you never miss the battles, the betrayals, and the legends that shaped the realm. The dance of the dragons had shattered the realm. Brother fought sister, dragon turned upon dragon, and in the end, the mighty beast that had once conquered kingdoms lay broken, bleeding, or turned to ash. The Targaryen dynasty survived, yes, but it emerged scarred, weakened, and forever changed. The reign of Aegon III, the boy king known as the Dragonbane, set the tone for the generations that followed. He had witnessed horrors that no child should see. His mother, Queen Rhaenyra, devoured alive by a dragon before his very eyes. When he ascended the throne, there were no songs of triumph, only whispers of sorrow. Aegon III was haunted, distant, and cold. Most of all, he was marked by a bitter truth. The dragons were dying. One by one, the last of the great beasts perished under his reign. The skies of Westeros grew empty. The thunder of wings faded, and with them vanished the power that had once made the Targaryens invincible. It was said that Aegon hated dragons, that their fire only reminded him of grief and death. He did little to preserve them, and so, as the years passed, House Targaryen became a dynasty of dragon lords without dragons. This loss cut deeper than most dared admit. For without dragons, the Iron Throne no longer seemed unshakable. Lords across the Seven Kingdoms began to wonder if the Targaryens were no longer gods made flesh. If they could not summon fire and wings, then were they not simply another family clinging to power? Seeds of rebellion and discontent were planted in these quiet doubts, seeds that would grow in the centuries to come. Aegon I's death brought his young son Daeron to the throne. Known as the Young Dragon, Daeron was bold where his father had been weary. At only 14 years old, he marched upon Dorne, determined to finish what his ancestors had failed to achieve, the conquest of the Desert Kingdom. At first, he triumphed. His army swept across Dorne, and victory seemed certain. But Dorne was a land of hidden daggers and burning sun, and the Dornish would never bend easily. They rose in rebellion, striking from shadows and desert passes. Daeron himself was killed in an ambush, and the conquest crumbled into ruin. The young dragon's death was a bitter reminder that the Targaryen dynasty, without dragons, was vulnerable. His brother Baelor, remembered as Baelor the Blessed, took the crown. A pious man, more devoted to gods than to rule, Baelor shut himself away in prayer and fasting. Yet his reign, though remembered for piety, was also marked by neglect. He obsessed over faith, building the great sept of Baelor in King's Landing, but left the burdens of rule to others. This reliance on corrupt hands weakened the throne further, and when Baelor died, the crown passed to Viserys II, a shrewd and capable man who had long served as regent. But his reign was short, and soon it was his son Aegon IV, remembered in infamy as Aegon the Unworthy, who took the Iron Throne. If the Targaryens had once been figures of awe, Aegon IV dragged their name into the mud. He was a glutton, a tyrant, and a man of endless vices. He filled the court with mistresses, feasted while his people starved, and punished his enemies with cruelty beyond reason. His reign was one of corruption and waste, but it was the final act of his rule that planted the deadliest seeds of rebellion yet. On his deathbed, Aegon IV legitimized all of his bastards. Among them were the Blackfires, sons born of his mistress and rivals to the true-born line of his heirs. With a single stroke of royal decree, Aegon set the stage for generations of bloodshed. For these bastards, though legitimized, would never be fully accepted, yet they would forever believe they had a rightful claim to the Iron Throne. The crown passed to Daeron II, called Daeron the Good, but his reign was soon threatened by the very bastards his father had unleashed. Demon Blackfire, the mightiest among them, took up the ancestral sword Blackfire and declared himself king. The realm split as banners were raised in rebellion, and the first Blackfire rebellion tore through Westeros. Lords divided, brothers turned upon brothers, and though Daeron II held the throne, the shadow of Blackfire ambition would haunt the realm for decades. The Blackfire rebellions were more than wars of succession. They were wounds that refused to heal. Time and again, new pretenders rose, each claiming to be the rightful king. They found eager allies among those who had long despised Targaryen rule, and though each rebellion was put down, the cracks in the dynasty deepened. By the time of King Aerys, the realm was weary, drained by endless plots and uprisings. Aerys was a bookish man, more concerned with scrolls and prophecies than with ruling. He left the governance of the realm to his hand, the great knight Brynden Rivers, known as Bloodraven. A sorcerer and spy master, Bloodraven ruled with an iron hand, using his network of informers to root out treason before it could bloom. To some, he was a protector. To others, a tyrant cloaked in shadows. Yet even Bloodraven's ruthless vigilance could not erase the legacy of division that Aegon IV had left behind. After Aerys came Maker, a stern and practical king who sought to stabilize the realm. His reign, though less troubled by rebellion, ended in tragedy when he died in battle. The succession was uncertain, and it was through a great council that his fourth son, Aegon V, rose to the throne. Aegon the Unlikely, as he was called, had never expected to rule. Known to history as Egg, once the squire of Sir Duncan the Tall, he had seen the struggles of the small folk firsthand. Aegon V sought to reform the realm, to ease the burdens of peasants and curb the excesses of lords. But his good intentions often met with resistance from the nobility, who bristled at any challenge to their ancient privileges. His reign was a constant struggle between crown and nobility, progress and tradition. And looming over it all was the dwindling memory of dragons. It was said that Aegon V longed to restore the dragons to his house, to bring back the fire that had once made the Targaryens mighty. This longing led to the tragedy at Summerhall, a mysterious catastrophe in which the king, his kin, and many others perished in fire and shadow. The details are lost to time. The whispers say that in his attempt to hatch dragon eggs, he unleashed a doom beyond his control. Summerhall became a charred ruin, a monument to broken dreams. With Aegon V's death, his son Jaehaerys II inherited the throne. His reign was brief, marked by frailty and illness, but it set the stage for the most infamous king of them all, his son, Aerys II. Known to history as the Mad King, Aerys began his rule with promise, young and charismatic, filled with hope for renewal. But as the years passed, paranoia and cruelty consumed him. When Aerys II Targaryen first ascended the Iron Throne, hope stirred in the realm. He was young, handsome, and full of vigor, with dreams of restoring the crown's glory. His queen, Rhaella, and their children seemed to promise a bright future. Even the great lords of Westeros, weary of past strife, were willing to believe in this king's vision. But behind the crown's glitter, shadows lurked. At Aerys' side stood his boyhood friend, Sir Tywin Lannister. Appointed hand of the king, Tywin was sharp, ruthless, and efficient. It was said that during those early years, Tywin ruled more than Aerys, and for a time the realm prospered under his hand. Justice was swift, corruption punished, and the coffers filled. The people whispered that Tywin would have made the better king, And perhaps those whispers planted the first seeds of envy in Aerys' heart. For kings are not made to share power, and Aerys grew resentful of his friend's shadow. The rivalry worsened when Tywin's wife, Joanna, bore twins, Jaime and Cersei. Their birth was celebrated, yet Aerys, with his wandering eye, was said to have spoken words too bold, comments that stung Tywin's pride. As years passed, the friendship turned bitter, and Aerys' paranoia began to stir. Still, the realm held steady until the defiance of Duskendale. There, Lord Denis Darklyn captured the king, holding him prisoner for half a year. It was Sir Barristan Selmy, the bold knight of the Kingsguard, who rode alone into the dungeons and rescued him. But the damage was done. Aerys, once proud, never forgot the humiliation of captivity. He returned to King's Landing a changed man, fearful, suspicious, and increasingly cruel. From that day, the seeds of madness grew into thorns. He locked himself in the Red Keep, trusting no one, lashing out at allies and enemies alike. Even his queen became more prisoner than wife, forced to bear children under his command. He delighted in watching men burn, fascinated by wildfire, whispering that the flames spoke to him. The king who had once inspired hope now inspired terror. And yet the realm still endured, for lords were cautious, and rebellion had not yet found its spark. That spark came through prophecy, passion, and a fateful rebellion in the Vale. At the great tourney of Harrenhal, lords and knights from across the realm gathered beneath the broken towers. It was meant as spectacle, but it became the stage for destiny. Among the attendees was Prince Rhaegar Targaryen, son of the Mad King. Unlike his father, Rhaegar was loved, tall, noble, and melancholy, with a harp that could make women weep and a mind full of prophecy. He was wed to Elia Martell of Dorne, but his eyes had long sought something else, something hidden in the flames of fate. When he won the tournament, tradition demanded he crown the Queen of Love and Beauty. All expected him to honor his wife. But Rhaegar, before thousands, placed the crown of blue roses upon the lap of Lyanna Stark, daughter of Winterfell, betrothed to Robert Baratheon. Gasps rippled through the crowd. It was a choice that would shatter kingdoms. What happened next remains debated. Some say Rhaegar abducted Lyanna, driven by passion. Others whisper she went willingly, bound by prophecy. Whatever truth lies buried, the effect was the same. Robert Baratheon, her betrothed, called it an outrage. Lyanna's brother Brandon rode to King's Landing, demanding her release. Aerys' response was madness itself. He seized Brandon, strangling him with a cord around his neck as his father, Lord Rickard Stark, was burned alive by wildfire. The North cried for vengeance. The Vale, the Stormlands, and the Riverlands joined them. Houses Stark, Arryn, Tully, and Baratheon raised their banners, calling it rebellion. The Mad King named it treason. And so began Robert's Rebellion, a war that would end the Dragon Dynasty. At its heart were four men whose names would echo through history. Eddard Stark, cold and steadfast, carrying the honor of the North. Robert Baratheon, stormborn and furious, wielding his great warhammer with the strength of 10 men. Jon Arryn, the wise lord of the Eyrie, who raised his banners rather than surrender his wards to the king's madness. And Hoster Tully, who bound the rebels together through marriage, linking Stark, Tully, and Arryn by oath and blood. The war raged across Westeros, its battles fierce and bloody. At Ashford, Robert won his first great victory, smashing the royalists who opposed him. At the Battle of the Bells in Stony Sept, Robert was nearly lost, hidden in the town as the royal host closed in. It was Eddard Stark and Jon Arryn who led the rescue, turning the tide and sending the king's men fleeing. Yet the war was not without loss. Elia Martell, wife of Prince Rhaegar, and her children remained in King's Landing, pawns in the Game of Thrones. The realm trembled as loyalties were tested. Some lords stood firm with the rebels, others bent knee to the Iron Throne. At last the great moment came, the Battle of the Trident. Beneath the crossing of the river, Robert and Rhaegar met in single combat. The prince wore black armor, the rubies on his breastplate shining like stars, and Robert wielded his great warhammer. Their clash was thunder itself, the fate of kingdoms hanging on their blows. In the end, Robert struck true, shattering his chest, sending rubies scattering into the river as the prince fell. With Rhaegar dead, the cause of the crown crumbled. Loyalist armies melted away, and the road to King's Landing lay open. But in the capital, madness had reached its peak. Aerys, too, raving and broken, commanded his pyromancers to set wildfire beneath the city. If he could not rule, he would see King's Landing reduced to ash. "Burn them all," he whispered. Burn them all, but salvation came from betrayal. Sir Jaime Lannister, youngest of the Kingsguard, son of Tywin, was ordered to protect his king. Instead, he drew his sword and struck him down, ending the Mad King's life with a single blow. The pyromancers died, their plots undone, and the city was spared from fire. Outside the walls, Tywin Lannister arrived with his host, feigning loyalty to the king before opening the gates. His men poured into the city, and with them came horror. Princess Eoya Martell and her children were murdered, slain by Sir Gregor Clegane and Sir Amory Lorque. The blood of innocents stained the halls of the Red Keep, and though Robert Baratheon took the throne, this massacre would leave wounds that never healed, particularly in Dorne. Robert's victory seemed complete. The Targaryen dynasty, rulers for nearly 3 centuries, lay broken. Viserys, the young prince, fled across the narrow sea with his sister Daenerys, carried into exile. The once proud house of dragon lords had been reduced to 2 frightened children in a foreign land. Yet the rebellion left shadows. Robert took the throne, but his claim rested not on blood, but on conquest. He was king by right of arms, not by ancient lineage. His marriage to Cersei Lannister bound him to the Lions of the West, but the scars of war lingered. Eddard Stark returned home with Lyanna's body, her death cloaked in sorrow and mystery. Rhaegar's legacy, whispered through prophecy, remained unresolved. And in the Far East, the last Targaryens carried with them both hope and vengeance. The Age of Dragons was over, replaced by an age of iron and rebellion. Yet history has a way of circling back. For though Robert wore the crown, though the dragons were gone, the blood of the dragons still lived. And in time, fire and blood would seek to return. The fall of House Targaryen had not come with fire consuming King's Landing, but with betrayal, rebellion, and the madness of kings. Their downfall was not sudden, but centuries in the making, from the loss of their dragons, to the corruption of their rulers, to the final flames of Aerys' madness. What began as glory on the wings of conquest ended in ashes scattered across the realm. Yet even as the dust settled, whispers endured, of dragon eggs hidden, of prophecies unfulfilled, of the day when the dragon would rise again. With the Iron Throne claimed by Robert Baratheon, the Seven Kingdoms entered a new era, one of uneasy peace, fragile alliances, and rulers who had taken power not by right, but by the strength of their arms. Yet for House Targaryen, exile became the only path to survival. Viserys and Daenerys, the last heirs of the Dragon Lords, were spirited across the narrow sea by loyal retainers. The Red Keep and King's Landing faded behind them, replaced by the uncertain lands of Essos, where the remnants of Targaryen pride clung to survival. Viserys, the elder, grew bitter as he watched from afar. He was a prince in name only, living in shadows, dependent on the charity of merchants and minor houses. His dreams were unyielding, to reclaim the throne that had been stolen, to restore the dragons, and to see the Iron Throne in Targaryen hands once more. Yet the years in exile hardened him, fueling arrogance, cruelty, and a dangerous obsession with destiny. Daenerys, the youngest, was a fragile child when she fled, her memories of home clouded by fear and loss. She grew under her brother's harsh tutelage, and later, under the guidance of new allies and mentors in foreign lands. Though timid at first, the fire of her lineage stirred within her. Every story of dragons, every whisper of prophecy, shaped her. She was the living testament to a fallen dynasty, carrying the weight of generations of ambition, glory, and tragedy on her small shoulders. Meanwhile, Westeros settled into a fragile peace under Robert's rule. The lords who had fought for the rebellion returned to their lands, yet the scars of war were deep. The North remained vigilant, the Vale cautious, and Dorne burned with resentment over the brutal murder of Elia Martell and her children. Though Robert married Cersei Lannister to secure the loyalty of the Western houses, the unity was fragile, built more on fear and debt than trust. Across the narrow seas, Targaryen loyalists plotted in silence. They sent letters, gathered resources, and waited for the right moment to act. Yet, without dragons, without armies, and without allies of comparable power, their hopes seemed a dream. It was a dynasty in exile, a family defined by what they had lost, by the weight of a crown they could not yet claim. Viserys' impatience became his downfall. He demanded, he threatened, he sought warriors to carve a path back to Westeros. His hubris blinded him to caution, and in the end, it would cost him everything. In the Dothraki lands, his arrogance clashed with the raw, untamed power of the Horse Lords. Attempting to assert authority where he had none, he provoked a chain of events that would lead to his death. The throne he dreamed of would never be his, but the seed of the Targaryen return had been planted in the heart of Daenerys, who witnessed both the fragility of exile and the cruelty of ambition. History, however, did not forget the Mad King. Even in death, Aerys II's shadow loomed over the realm. The Mad King's paranoia had left marks that endured in every corner of Westeros. His obsession with wildfire lingered in memory, a cautionary tale for those who would wield power without restraint. His reign was a lesson in tyranny, in obsession, and in the peril of unchecked authority. Lords and small folk alike told stories of his madness, of men burning, of conspiracies imagined and punished, of a king who sought to destroy the very people he ruled. The consequences of rebellion and the fall of the dragons were more than political. They were cultural, spiritual, and psychological. Westeros had known the fire of dragons for centuries, wings that could cast shadow across armies, fire that could melt stone. Without them, the realm felt smaller, weaker, more mortal. Houses that had once bowed in fear now calculated ambition. The nobility, aware that the crown's power was no longer absolute, began scheming, plotting, and asserting their influence in ways that would shape the realm for generations. Even within the Red Keep, Robert Baratheon's court was a web of tension. The Lannisters, who had played both sides during the rebellion, now held unprecedented influence. Tywin Lannister, ever calculating, ensured his family's position at the heart of power. Cersei's presence as queen became a symbol of alliance, but also a simmering threat. Her ambitions hidden behind a smile, her loyalty measured in advantage. The realm's politics became a chessboard where no single king could command absolute obedience. Yet among the people, whispers endured of the dragon's return. Prophecies, old tales, and the lore of Valyria persisted. The realm had seen the fire of House Targaryen, and even in exile, the memory of that power sparked hope, fear, and fascination. Merchants, sailors, and wanderers carried tales of surviving dragons, lost eggs, and hidden heirs across the narrow sea. In the minds of some, the dragons were not gone, merely waiting. This legacy of fear and fascination defined Daenerys Targaryen's life. Every lesson, every story, every legend of her ancestors became part of her identity. She learned that fire could destroy, that power could corrupt, and that cruelty often disguised itself as wisdom. In the streets and camps of Essos, she discovered allies and enemies alike, each testing her resolve, each shaping the ruler she was destined to become. The fall of House Targaryen also left marks on Westeros that would endure for decades. The Baratheons, though victorious, ruled a realm fractured by mistrust. The North remained loyal in sentiment, but wary of southern interference. Dorne, scarred by the murder of its princess and heirs, carried grievances that would last generations. And the Riverlands, torn by conflict during the rebellion, became a battleground of competing claims. Stability was fragile, and the memory of dragons haunted the nobility's ambition, inspiring both caution and intrigue. In truth, the decline of Targaryen power was a slow, generational unraveling. From the Dragonbane who saw the last of the dragons die to Aegon IV, and his Blackfires, who fractured loyalties to Aerys II, whose madness nearly burned a city to ash. The dynasty had been undone by greed, fear, and human frailty. The fire that had conquered kingdoms had diminished, leaving only embers, and in those embers lay both danger and promise. Viserys' death, Daenerys' survival, and Robert's reign were chapters in a saga of ambition, tragedy, and prophecy. The Targaryen line persisted, fragile yet enduring, a reminder that dynasties are never truly gone until the last heir is extinguished. And as the wind carried whispers of dragons across the narrow sea, the stage was set for a next act, a return not through conquest alone, but through the persistence of blood, legacy, and fire. And so ends this chapter in the history of Westeros, the story of the Mad King, the fall of dragons, and the rise of rebellion that reshaped the Seven Kingdoms forever. From fire and fury to exile and hope, House Targaryen's saga reminds us that power is fragile, and that the shadow of one ruler's madness can echo across generations. If you've enjoyed traveling through the blood and fire of history, don't forget to hit that like button. Let the realm know you honor the tales of old. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Would you have followed Robert Baratheon or pledged your sword to the last dragons? And of course, subscribe to our channel so you never miss the next journey through the history of Westeros, where legends are born and dynasties rise and fall. Remember, the dragons may sleep, but their legacy never dies.